Hey everyone, it's Bob Pulver. In this episode of Elevate Your AIQ, I talk with Jeff Mike, Managing Director at Flextrack, about AI in talent acquisition using a broad lens that encompasses all talent pools. We discuss the practical applications of AI, how AI tools are being integrated into Flextrack's next generation vendor management system, and the role of data privacy and trust in AI's future. We explore how AI is augmenting human capabilities in talent acquisition and beyond, and how you can leverage these advancements to elevate your own AIQ. I really enjoyed this chat with Jeff, as I do all my conversations with him, and I hope you find it insightful. Thanks for listening. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Elevate Your AIQ. I'm your host, Bob Pulver. With me today is my friend Jeff Mike. How you doing, Jeff?
Doing well, Bob. Thanks. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for being here. Just to start things off, why don't you give the listeners a little bit of background about how you got to your current role at Flextrack?
Sure. Thanks, Bob. So my role is Managing Director of Customer Strategy and Value at Flextrack. And Flextrack is a next generation vendor management system. My role is focused on working with our sales teams, our product teams, and our customer success teams to ensure that we're identifying and tracking towards customer business outcomes. We deliver the required capabilities. And then this is important, making sure we're measuring progress or achievement of those business outcomes. By background, I have a long history in talent acquisition. Interestingly enough, started in staffing, went over to HR for about 17 or 18 years, focused mainly on talent acquisition, but also HR leadership. And then I spent about 5 years at Burson and Deloitte doing HR research and leading the research team for Deloitte's human capital practice. I've been with Flextrack for about 2.5 years. In addition to the description that I gave previously, I also focus on partnerships with our global systems implementers and then also our technology alliance partners.
Excellent. So the way you described what you're building sounds impressive and the opposite of a lot of the sort of shiny objects that we see today in talent acquisition, especially as it relates to AI and looking at, real, value creation, right? As opposed to productivity and some of the things we see that are labeled as AI, but they're really automation. And some of that stuff has been around for, as you know, for, probably a decade. As you think about the contingent workforce space, how AI, helps that and perhaps helps connect it to some of the other talent acquisition strategies. How do you think about that space and how FlexTrack is trying to incorporate that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a good place to start because I think with all of the hype and some of the fear that's associated with AI or what we call AI, I think you made an interesting comment. AI that we use is very much, I think, machine learning. AI in terms of true intelligence is still a few years off. But since that's what the industry is using, that's what everyone's talking about, that's where we go. And so, really, what's important is to start with the use cases. So, getting through this kind of hype, all the noise around it, what's been important for us and what's been important for our customers is that we start with practical use cases. What is a need that the organizations or the customers have? And how can the AI tools, both predictive and generative, address those use cases? And so that's typically where we start.
I was gonna ask, I guess maybe just expand a little bit about or how you're integrated or built on a Salesforce platform, and obviously they've embraced, AI as well.
So FlexTrack is built on the Salesforce Lightning platform. And what that allows us to do is become much more of a platform as a service rather than the software as a service models that the industry has known for a couple of decades. And specifically, that allows us to escape some of the technical debt that the legacy systems have accumulated over the years and allows us to bring Salesforce investment in those platform tools directly to our customers. So Salesforce invests billions of dollars a year in things like user experience, security, global reach, and of course, AI. And specifically, what our customers seem to get most excited about in terms of Salesforce tools or the capabilities that being built on Salesforce allows us to bring is an integration studio. So it's a very robust studio of tools designed to make integration an opportunity rather than a hassle. So putting FlexTrack into your tech stack is really much more simple and streamlined than it has been before because of different types of APIs. We have certified connectors, and then there's the App Store with 7,000 or more business enabling apps that are available right on the platform. A couple of other things include Flow Builder, which is a graphic or drag and drop workflow tool, which allows for a lot more flexibility and agility. We offer on platform analytics and AI, which is really exciting as well. So, Salesforce, as you may know, purchased Tableau a few years ago and has integrated the data visualization and data management tools of Tableau into the on platform analytics capabilities and AI capabilities. So, real briefly, that allows for machine learning. It's called Einstein AI. It has data modeling tools, data cleaning tools, and really allows us to build, data models on really complex sets of data from the program without needing data science expertise. You can actually ask questions and set up models in natural language questions. And once you have the data identified, the on-platform data tools and AI will execute the data model and the analysis and give you suggestions. So one quick use case there is, for example, onboarding data. You might have a large complex program. Because of our case functionality, again, which comes with the Salesforce platform, we create a case for every onboarding situation. And that case is workflowed through that flow builder for specifics of whatever segment geographically, labor category, or even business unit is required. Each step can then be automated, audited, and tracked and reported on to keep track of every step in the onboarding process. And that allows the Einstein AI to create a model of where are some of the bottlenecks, for example, that you might experience in onboarding. How can we identify those, and what can we do to address some of those bottlenecks? So that's one of the use cases that we have.
You've basically got embedded sort of process mining baked into that platform with that particular use case, which sounds pretty powerful, right? Like, where are the points of friction that may not be evident if you look at it from a sort of bird's eye view, but to be able to go in at individual points, if you just sort of follow it along that process map or that workflow, be able to have the analytics step by step. You're talking about improving experiences at the end of the day and identifying other opportunities for, automation or where to apply AI. So I think that's an excellent use case and a lot of robust capability, because otherwise you got to bring in another vendor, or maybe I'm sort of dating myself, but I remember when process mining had to be a separate and discrete implementation to go and basically be your take an MRI of your process, right? The fact that that's embedded now, I wasn't even aware of that, so that's interesting.
As you may know, there's predictive and there's generative AI, which are the most common. Predictive is using the copious amounts of data in programs or whatever the application is to identify patterns and trends and make predictions and prescriptions. Generative is really more about creating new content. And since the release of ChatGPT a year and a half or so ago, there's been a lot of hype around generative AI. There is a lot of investment in generative AI from Salesforce, but we take a little bit of a different approach because the customers have different preferences and are at different stages of their AI journey. So we provide access to generative AI through our integrations. So if a customer is using ChatGPT, if they're using Copilot, if they're using Google's generative AI solution, we can integrate those instances directly into the platform and maintain the relationship the customer maintains the relationship between the provider with regards to access, with regards to data protection. We simply integrate it into the platform and into the program for the customers.
This is William Tincup, and I'd like to direct you to a wonderful limited series podcast that Ryan and I recorded live at the ERE Recruiting Innovation Summit. We sat down with 20 recruiting and TA leaders from around the world to hear what today's best recruiters are doing to stay sharp, stay relevant, and stay ahead. It's called The Talent Shift. You'll love it. You'll find the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Listen, like, review, share. Do you.
So that's really designed to be part of a larger, maybe enterprise-wide generative AI strategy versus, the HCM or the HRIS or the ATS has one type of AI, generative AI. The VMS has another type of generative AI. The analytics team, the finance team might have different types of AI. We're designed to really fit where the customer is going, where they are and where they're going with their generative AI approach. And then from there, we'll develop similar use cases.
A couple things come to mind as you describe that. Because you have those specialized use cases for generative AI, and I'll just call them each of those, an agent for just for the sake of simplicity. Would you potentially provide user interface that acts as sort of I guess I describe it as like the general contractor, which then goes and takes that command or that request and then goes and knows which of those other agents to contact based on the request and what it knows about, the context and how that workflow exists?
Yeah, we could do that. It really depends on, again, the broader corporate strategy. But we've already done some experimentation in our we'll call it our design lab. We've done some voice interface to get started. For example, we've had customers ask us about, our managers sometimes are on a shop floor, they're on a rig, they're out in the field, they're not able to access even a keyboard. So how can we have them start to do some of their contingent workforce management responsibilities? How can we have them perform them with a chat interface or with a verbal command interface? So we've started experimenting with that. We've done a couple of use cases there, and we're going to continue to build that out. Similar to the experience, this may be a little bit different, but we also are creating kind of like a Netflix or like an Amazon experience that kind of personalizes the experience based on the persona and then ultimately the individual when they're working in the extended workforce. That might start with a requisition or a different type of contingent worker that similar managers are accessing or have had similar success with in the past, or based on the history of the individual hiring manager, just to kind of help them accelerate their ability to get things done. And eventually that could lead into a more generalized interface, either with the rest of the VMS, which is kind of already there, or a broader interaction with maybe HR systems or with broader corporate systems. We haven't built those yet, but we have the connectors and we have the capabilities to do it.
Nice. The other thing I was going to bring up, this came up in conversation with one of my talent intelligence community. We were talking about dashboards, and so you mentioned Tableau, which is part of Salesforce now. But one of the questions or the discussions was, if you can ask a contextual question about your data through that, conversational interface, whether that's voice or text, and it can generate you a graph, a chart, whatever on the fly. Do we need all these dashboards? Because I feel like there's a lot of people, that's all they do. Their job is to create new sort of custom dashboards for people. But I mean, it's like, why do I need a cockpit if all I want to know is how fast I'm going? It seems like a much more efficient, fit for purpose approach to getting a visual of what you're after. So I'm not sure if any of your clients have, talked about that, or if you've done any experimentation with that. Just want to get your thoughts more generally as well.
We have the conversational interface connection. Again, there's lots of them out there, and you can integrate them very quickly into Flextrack because, again, our architecture. I think what you're describing, though, is we're in a transition period. So we'll take it in a couple of steps. Having Tableau on the platform, having essentially drag and drop report builders, having these data tools, that really it accelerates the ability right now to be able to get those graphs and charts and that contextual data more quickly. You can do it through, we'll say, point and click or drag and drop or whatever, whatever works. The challenge right now is you have a lot of people who are used to seeing dashboards and aren't used to applying the capabilities that you're describing. So the first step is really we're taking that process of building dashboards and data visualization from, let's say, having a team of analysts in offshore team of analysts working around the clock or working for a couple of days to produce those monthly reports, or from having to go to a third party system like you suggested to being able to do it right on the platform. So someone in the PMO or the VMO or the MSP, rather than having to take a day or two to create the reports, those reports and charts and visualizations are going to be available more quickly. So as people get used to seeing those more quickly and get used to the more powerful tools that are available, there will be an evolution towards, I think what you're talking about is being a little bit more specific. Well, we'll use the example that we've had. I've got to decrease my onboarding time for this particular segment. Let's say it's professional services. I'm losing revenue because I'm not able to onboard my consultants and my contingent workers fast enough to deploy to client work. You could ask the question, you could drill through kind of the steps that we're taking, you know, use onboarding data for this segment to help me understand or to point out how can I improve my onboarding times? Where are the bottlenecks and what should I do? So essentially, those are the questions that we're asking. We have to take a few steps. You have to identify the data set. You have to make sure that the natural language processing understands your question and can push that out. So kind of a long way of saying, I think we're taking steps there. And the technology, while the technology might be capable now, you have to bring the users up to where the technology can bring them. And sometimes that takes a little more time, or it may take transitional steps to get there. So I think your vision is correct. I think over time we'll get there. And over time, people will start to build their skills in AI and all things data. Again, I think one of the real benefits of AI is it reduces that data literacy challenge that has been so prevalent in terms of analytics, and particularly people analytics and HR and contingent workforce. It moves that forward very quickly. So then the people working can be deployed to do other activities versus putting reports together and creating visualizations.
No, that makes sense, and it will take time, and it will be sort of an evolution, like you said. And you made an important point just a second ago around the data literacy piece. When we talk about upskilling and getting people comfortable with AI in
Whether you're a payroll pro or an employee wanting to understand your paycheck better, we've got you covered. Tune into It's About Payroll for expert insights on payroll trends and compliance, or check out It's About Your Paycheck, the go-to podcast for employees looking to understand their pay and rights. 2 great shows, 2 great hosts. Listen now. Brought to you by Work Defined, where payroll meets clarity.
Hello, this is Michael Vandervoort from the Drive Through HR podcast, where we discuss ideas, trends, and activities that impact HR, talent, HR technology in the workplace. Our focus is on expanding knowledge and igniting curiosity as we hear directly from people who are shaping the future of the HR industry. Join us.
in the current state, it's much easier to upskill on generative AI because it's sort of its own. The tool itself can guide you and tutor you. Just ask it how to use it, more effectively, or you can reframe your questions. I mean, it's very user friendly in that sense. We're not talking about upskilling AI in a predictive and operational AI, machine learning, natural language sense, in terms of an extension of your data science or data analysis kind of career trajectory. Generative AI is much different and has a much simpler learning curve and is much more approachable than a data career trajectory, I guess.
Correct. I would agree, and that's where you probably heard of prompt engineering. Really, what we talk about in terms of generative AI, and even if you have a natural language interface with the predictive AI, you don't need to know the data science. You need to know your program, and you need to know which questions to ask. And then, I would start with, you need to know what outcomes you're after. You need to know your program, and you need to know what questions you need to ask of the data or of the machine learning and AI of the data. That's more important than spending, weeks or years learning data science or even statistics.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you and I have talked about it, I mean, I've definitely had a focus on responsible AI, and that's not just complying with legislation. I mean, that's being responsible by design. And when we think about upskilling, and I think of using AI responsibly as part of that upskilling, I think it's important for people to understand enough about like where the data is coming from, but you do have to think critically about the source of the data, because if you're questioning, well, first of all, the output of these generative AI tools, it's not a calculator, right? So it's not giving you a definitive, this is 100% correct kind of answer. So, of course, everyone's familiar with the term hallucination because it doesn't really know what it's regurgitating back to you. But I want to make sure listeners understand how they're using it and whether they can trust it at the end of the day.
I think that's a really good point. And I didn't bring up critical thinking, but I think you're raising it is really important. Along with that ability to generate the right questions, you have to know your program and your data, like you mentioned, at least where the data is generated, what it says, what it can and can't do. And then you have to apply that critical thinking. That's where the human in the loop, I think, is another term people have probably heard a lot, where you have to think critically about the results that the AI puts out or what it's doing to make sure that it is not hallucinating, as you mentioned. When I learned how large language models work, and they're really just predicting the order of words based on these huge data sets that they're using, but they really have no understanding of the data. I think there's a lot of really smart people and a lot of investment going into addressing these hallucinations. But if you think about the nature of how they actually work, that problem will never be completely resolved, which is why I'm confident that AI is probably going to be more augmentation than replacement. And if we're talking about responsible AI, sure there's going to be jobs that change. Sure there's going to be some displacement, but again with reskilling and really thinking about what a person does best, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for people to kind of grow and upskill and do new things rather than be completely replaced.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I mean, at least I hope that's the way people are thinking about it, because there's a lot of other work that could be done if only we freed up time to take on those higher value activities. Let me just ask about, in terms of the client relationships, and obviously you spend a lot of time with clients and prospects. What are some of the high level challenges and concerns that you're hearing from them?
Yeah, sure. First of all, there's plenty of interest. I think every C-suite has to talk about AI and what it means, and so that certainly makes its way to people who manage the contingent workforce and the technology associated with the contingent workforce. Without a doubt, the most prevalent comment or most prevalent reaction is a concern about the privacy of data. And I think from the enterprise organizations, they've made it clear across to their leadership, to their managers, and down the line, we have to protect our data. We can't just feed our data into open source large language models and expect that they're going to come back with the right answers and expect that they're going to protect our data. So that's usually the first question when we're talking with customers about generative AI is, okay, how do we protect our data? And then to your point, how do we trust what's coming back? And so what they want is, where are the use cases that can actually improve our lives, that can improve our program? Get me beyond kind of the hype and the robot apocalypse type stuff and this futurism stuff, to give me some real examples of how this is going to make my life better and improve the experience for our consultants and for our hiring managers.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I guess if we sort of shift that to broad goals in terms of like workforce ecosystems, right? As people think about the agility of some of these systems and the ability to tap into different talent pools and use technology to make that an efficient process, does that tie into the data concern in terms of, we don't understand it now, or we don't have our arms around it now, that problem's going to be exacerbated when we start connecting more systems and data?
The pace of change in the world of business is fast, and that drives incredible complexity for the world of human resources.
Welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast, a series of conversations with experts inside and outside the world of HR on how to innovate, measure, and evolve our practices.
Our goal is to help provide you with practical examples of how HR has to change to meet the complexity of the business environment.
Every week, we'll talk to new and different voices on all aspects of HR.
And at times, we'll get irreverent.
Silly even.
And sometimes geek out on the data and technology that underlie the processes that drive the world of HR.
But the conversations are always insightful and fun. So please, enjoy the HR Data Labs podcast.
Flowing sort of multi-directionally and across this ecosystem? Or is that a sort of separate challenge?
No, I think that's a challenge, but I think it's also an opportunity depending on how you look at it. So as I mentioned earlier, because of our architecture and because of our connectability and data tools, we see integrations as an opportunity. Yes, for a lot of people right now, it's very complex, and it's becoming even more complex. But we believe very strongly in this ecosystem approach, because what that'll do is that'll create something that fits each customer's unique needs and preferences, in terms of not only the core solution, the system of record like the VMS, but also the core infrastructure solutions like the ERP, like the invoice, like HRIS or HCM, and also all of the different point solutions may be fit for a specific purpose for a given organization's unique needs at that time. So we believe very much in the ecosystem approach and bringing the best of the ecosystem, what fits best for a customer, into their tech stack and into their contingent workforce tech stack, so that it runs well for them. That does bring a burgeoning complexity with regards to data, like you mentioned. And so obviously the data has to be secure. That's where, again, the investments that Salesforce is making is really important for our customers, in making sure that the connections are secure, making sure that we're only bringing the data that's needed. For example, every time we do an integration, each field that the customer selects is immediately mapped through the API for reporting. It has to be reportable, and so you can see what's happening. And then the data management, the machine learning, and ultimately the AI tools, they're really good and really important in making sense of that copious amount and complex data from many different sources. So yes, it's complex, and particularly complex if you're thinking about, the way we looked at big data and the way we looked at integrations, maybe 10 years ago, where you need a platform, you need code-based integrations, and your workflows are a little bit more rigid. Now we have connectors and we have tools to bring these all together in a secure way and in a quick way, so that the AIs can start working on making sense of all of that complex data, and with, of course, the direction from the user, the program office, the MSP.
Yep, absolutely. Are you seeing a consolidation of responsibility in this space, such that there's a single person that's overseeing this workforce ecosystem and its evolution, or are you still seeing organizations are trying to figure that out? What's your view there?
Again, I'm seeing some change management needs. So without a doubt, I'm seeing convergence between HR, procurement, IT, and finance on a total workforce approach. So yes, those silos have been in place for a long time, and for many years, particularly the HR people would say, "Oh, that's a non-employee. Don't talk to me about them." Even thinking about them is going to create a co-employment or a misclassification issue. A little bit of exaggeration there, but that's generally the approach that had been taken previously. I think more of the forward-looking CHROs and chief procurement officers are recognizing that you can't operate in silos anymore. Things are too uncertain, they're too complex, that silos in organizations generally are going to limit what you're able to do, and particularly in terms of scale, and particularly in terms of optimization of resources. And so we're seeing a definite convergence between HR and procurement. Sometimes there are HR people being sent to procurement to help them socialize around how HR looks at the workforce. Many times I'm seeing contingent workforce programs leadership being pulled under the head of TA, which is actually, I think, becoming more common, as well as under the CHRO, to start to work on de-siloing the workforce and being much more agile, and taking that kind of ecosystem approach of, we have all these sources for workers. It would be foolish for us to not make sure we're tapping into them. We're optimizing the spend and the resources and the output from these different resources. And the last thing I'll mention is the talent marketplace that you mentioned, or internal mobility. That's like a bridge, in my opinion, between the contingent workforce and the FTE workforce, because a lot of times those opportunities might go in parallel to internal opportunities. Maybe they're prioritized internally at first. If there's a robust marketplace, no takers or no likely candidates, and it can get pushed out to the extended workforce. And that should be automated through the HRIS or through the VMS, or some combination of both.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I spoke to Edie Goldberg about, you're going to get pushback from employees if you don't go to them first for an available project or new role, right? If you're immediately sort of going and fishing externally without looking inward, there's going to be I'm not saying there's going to be a mutiny, but people want to know that, listen, I'm here. I mean, I'm trying to be engaged. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to understand the business. I'm trying to be a good, team player. I'm trying to be loyal to this organization. And now this exciting opportunity comes up, and you're going to immediately flip it to, post it in Flextrack or, a freelance, platform or whatever. I mean, give them the opportunity and give them right of first refusal. And, if we don't have any takers, or we don't see a good skills match based on what talent marketplace is showing me, then yeah, go and look externally.
It's pretty clear. I've heard this over and over again. Nothing makes a valued FTE want to go somewhere else than seeing, someone from the outside coming in and taking an opportunity that they may have wanted and possibly making more money than they are. And so that's a really important point in terms of retention, in terms of development, in terms of having a really more robust build, borrow, buy, and now bot approach, which is another conversation. One of the things we're seeing inverted, though, and we've developed this tool, it's a decision wizard. So rather than having hiring managers say, I need an FTE, I want to go to the market, or I need a consultant or a contractor or SOW, and all the nuances that are associated with those, you start with the decision wizard and says, what's your need? And you can start putting the need in. I need a team to do this build. And the decision wizard can take them through the process of what they're building, say specific skills and capabilities and budget they might have. And then based on the workflows can push those needs into the appropriate labor category or the priorities of the organization. So maybe someone says, I have a project build that's going to take 6 months. You might think, I'm going to go to my favorite consulting firm to do this, or I'm going to do some staff augmentation because I don't have FTE, but I have budget. Or I'm being told I need to go to the internal talent marketplace rather than, having the hiring manager or the unit leader, the resource manager have to figure all this stuff out and know the nuances. You start with the need and it takes them to the appropriate place. You still want to leave a little bit of, it's a decision wizard, so you want to leave a little bit of agency, particularly for business unit leaders, either based on budget or based on availability or based on location or whatever criteria the organization wants. But we're taking away the need to understand the nuances of all of these categories, and you're building those into the workflows through the decision wizard. So that's something that we're seeing increasingly. We built and deployed a decision wizard for those purposes. And I think that's going to be something that continues to grow in terms of use and is really helpful in navigating these silos that we've been talking about, or breaking them down, actually.
I think that is exactly the direction that organizations need to go to be able to have that level of, adaptability and optimization simultaneously and look out across all those silos. I'm also, of course, thinking about putting my responsible AI hat on, and that's going to be tough to audit some of that in terms of the hiring decisions. I mean, it was hard enough with different decision points within a recruiting funnel, but now, if a job was ultimately filled through, an alternative path and an alternative talent pool, you've got to now aggregate that. So I guess just stepping back more generally on a personal level, there are generative AI tools that you tinker with, that you use in your day to day, either, your work or even in your personal life? Are there specific use cases that you like?
There's a couple of them. So I'm a big Grammarly user. I think Grammarly is kind of like an editor on steroids. It makes it really easy to use. When ChatGPT first came out, I enjoyed experimenting with it, and I still experiment with it and play with it. There are some graphic design tools that are out there. Even my son, for example, likes to graphic design, and so we got him access to some generative AI graphic tools, which are kind of fun to play with. So there's a lot out there. What I'm most excited about, Bob, are you may have heard of small language models. And so we have these large GPTs that are kind of large language models and kind of general purpose tools. Small language models are much more focused, and they're trained on very specific data sets for a very specific purpose. And so for me, those again allow you to hone in on those particular use cases that are most relevant and useful for your role, your organization, your unit, and then you can specifically train it with the content that you want to have in it. So one of the things we're using a tool at Flextrack, it's a GPT, but again, we're training it on the things we need for our customers rather than, what's generally out there. Certainly we're accessing what's generally out there, but the training is more focused on our content, our use cases, our needs, and what our customers are asking about. So, and that's really accelerated a lot of what we've been able to do. For me, particularly in terms of generating content, I still take responsibility for the content that I push out, but it takes me probably a fifth of the time to get a first draft done using those questions than it would have sitting down and writing something or coming up with a graphic. So, and what it does is it's very relevant. I don't have to insert, our differentiators. I have to insert our nuances into things. We just have trained the model on things that we use over and over again, and then we can adapt them specifically for a purpose. So I'm excited about small language models and the applications that they can create.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jeff, this last question I ask all my guests: what do you think the keys are for elevating your AIQ?
So you have to get involved. You have to engage. It's almost like a new tool. Think of those of us who were around in the 90s when the internet was, in its early stages and proliferating. You could be an early adopter. You could adopt the tools to help yourself accelerate, or you could be someone who's forced to do it. But eventually, there's going to be no choice. And the sooner you engage and start to learn and start to understand how the tools work, what the applications are, and what skills as a person you need to bring to the work equation to get the most out of both yourself and these tools, I think that's important. So make the decision to engage. There are so many resources out there that are designed to help people understand AI, both predictive and generative. I could name any of the learning platforms. There's Khan Academy, there's LinkedIn Learning. Salesforce offers their Trailblazer program, which is, free training on essentially anything Salesforce, including AI. Google offers something similar in terms of their AI. And I think less important than picking the right specific vendor is the decision to engage and starting to learn how these models work and how you can apply them. There might be nuances, like we were talking about, how they apply in different contexts. But more importantly is start the learning journey. And it's not necessarily like a learning program. You don't have to go to school for it or community college or sign up for an expensive program. You can, and maybe there are things you can do, but there are lots of inexpensive resources that will take you on a learning path to at least develop your basic literacy and develop your understanding and experiment with how to use these tools. And that's the other part is, I like to talk about navigating between fear and hype when it comes to AI. And the way to do that is to, one, start to educate yourself, but then in a safe way, start to experiment with these tools and understand, build your own ability to apply them in specific situations and grow and scale that ability as you learn.
Fantastic. Jeff, thank you so much for all your insight. This has been great.
Thanks, Bob. It's been a pleasure. Some great questions.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Jeff.
Bye, everyone.